You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
And I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we assign our guests a year, and they choose one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year for us to talk about. Except we have no guest this week.
Sort of.
I guess, yeah, kind of. He is represented in this episode. Today we are doing a Patreon-sponsored episode. So this episode is going to be brought to you by our good friend Dave Brown. He is the host of One Band Five Songs, the podcast on Spotify. Excellent podcast. I like to view it as sort of a primer for a band's discography. And the most recent episode, as of this recording, was on Stiff Little Fingers, and it's just a perfect episode. But Dave has been a patron since pretty much the beginning of since we launched the Patreon. And he's been on the show as well a couple times. He was on the episode for All's Breaking Things, and he has sponsored another episode before, which was the John Moreland and the Dust Bowl Souls record that we talked about. He's also contributed to our Best of the Year episode. I think it was last year's Best of episode. But yeah, we always love having Dave on and then talking about his records. So before we get into the show, though, if you want to become a patron, head over to patreon.com/punklautopod. For $1, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. And what are we talking about on the bonus this week?
This week we are doing a chart dive for the year 2002. So we figured that was a good way. It was something we've been doing on the Patreon for a while, but if you're not familiar, a good way to get a really in-depth look at the specific year corresponding to the album that we're talking about on the main episode, and just get a chance to kind of talk about stuff that may never ever come up on the show. So yeah, it's a good way to find out what else was out there. Of course, we always have a little bit of a chart section at the top, but this goes a lot further.
Yeah. And also, if you want to be a sponsor of an episode and have the album you want us to talk about, you can join our $10 tier. There's 2 of those. You only have to join it for a month and make your selection and then drop back down to $1 if you want. And then we'll talk about whatever record you want us to talk about. These are really fun. I wish more people took advantage of these because these are really fun episodes. We have another one lined up, ready to go. We've kind of, with weird scheduling going on, not had a chance to talk about that record, but we will get to it very soon. Yes, that's all. Patreon.com/punklautopod. We're on all the social medias. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at punklautopod. We have an email address. It's punklautopod@gmail.com, and a voicemail. Oh, this is perfect. It's 202-688-PUNK. It's coming up at that time of year where we are talking about the best of the year. So the reason why we set up the voicemail in the first place is so that people could call in and tell us their favorite records of the year. So if you want to have your voicemail read on the show, call that number, 202-688-PUNK. Leave a voicemail and we'll play it on the show. Just tell us what your favorite records were of 2021. We've used it a lot in the last 2 years, and I think it's one of our better. It's one of my favorite elements of the best of. Which, Dylan, I guess we need to start putting some lists together and figuring out what we're going to be talking about this year.
Yep, it's getting down to the wire.
Yeah, it's list making time, and then kind of keep your eye on what comes out throughout the rest of the year. There's always something that I feel like there's always a record that comes out the first week of December that throws a whole wrench in my ranking system. But those episodes are really fun to put together, so we have that to look forward to coming up. We have a Substack. punklautopod.substack.com. I always forget to plug this on the show, too. I also have another podcast. It's a wrestling podcast called Around the Ring, and I co-host that with Steve Long, and we usually just talk about what we've watched that week in wrestling. The most recent episode as of this recording was on AEW's Full Gear. We cover New Japan stuff, AEW stuff, MLW, Ring of Honor. We basically just don't cover WWE stuff, just because that's not a fun company to watch currently. You can check that out. That's on all your podcasting platforms. And I think that covers everything we need to up top, all the plugs and all that stuff. So, for this week's episode, Dave Brown has selected an album from the year 2002. So, we did our deep dive over there on the Patreon, but we left the top 3 pages for ourselves to talk about over here. So, going through here, this is the year post 9/11.
And what says the year after 9/11 more than Turn on the Bright Lights by Interpol?
Yeah. I've never listened to any Interpol, so I'll never know. I don't think I...
Extremely boring.
Well, Mastodon released Remission. You had that record, CD.
Record kicks ass.
Is it still good? When was the last time you heard it?
I think that's like the one.
Yeah?
I mean, I think Leviathan probably has its moments. And I think even like the next several records have their songs that are good. And but yeah, Remission, like beginning to end, I could probably enjoy that. I'm gonna wager that I could really enjoy that today.
This is also the year My Chemical Romance released I Brought You My Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love. We talked about this on the show a while back, actually. Right? Yeah, it's this one.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Pre-guests. Or if we had, it was like one guest.
I distinctly remember listening to this record while driving down to Chandler to jam with a drummer who I jammed with a few times that flaked on me. Funny enough, after I sent him a demo with a vocal take on it, so that was nice. Good motivator there. Like, oh shit.
Here's one that I listened to a couple weeks ago. It's Avril Lavigne's "Let Go."
Of course you did.
I was like, what's the deal with this record? What's it sound like? Like, what's the non-single tracks on this album sound like? Because it's a whole album. It feels very 2002. Like, the first track especially is that, like, they clearly hadn't figured out that the pop rock lane is, or like the pop punkin' spot tinged pop rock lane is where she should stay, because they try a little bit of everything. And like the first track feels like a 12 Stones song almost, like like a harder rock song that was, not nu metal. Nu metal was over at this point, and not like really grunge, but just like that over glossy hard rock sound. And then they do like some like just straight up like pop sounding stuff on the album. Skater Boy is kind of like a weird side track that doesn't feel like it belongs on this album, and didn't age as well. Skater Boy feels of its time, but Complicated actually still kind of holds up. There's some enjoyable moments on there. Overall, I'd say stick with the singles though. There's no like buried, hidden gems on that album.
You don't have to listen to the singles either. Really not essential music.
No.
You've heard them enough times without actively trying to hear them. Let's see here. Against Me is reinventing Axl Rose is a big deal.
Yeah, I listened to it because for some reason I had literally never listened to this record. And you're not going to believe.
And you were more into them than I ever was. It is surprising.
Yeah, well, there's something about like just a couple songs that I heard that I think just like kind of hit me in the right time. Because yeah, I think the first Against Me record I listened to the whole thing was like White Crosses. So like super duper late. Yeah, this is like the early stuff, so it's the folk punk stuff. It's a fun record. I totally get why it's such a big deal for the time period, and even like now. I bet like somebody really getting into this kind of music for the first time would really gravitate to that record. It's a very lyric centric album. Like it's one of those ones where you're just like, you're going to learn all the words to this record. I wasn't really one of those people, but I get it. I get it now. Hey, I get why people like Against Me.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Second Stage Turbine Blade.
Hell yeah, man.
Almost listened to that one this week, and I skipped it because I saw Emergency Numbers by Majority Rule, which I did talk about on the deep dive on the Patreon. But yeah, that's a great record.
Which one? Coheed?
Coheed.
Yeah. I'm the bigger Coheed fan of the two of us, but
yeah, I really don't revisit anything after the first two records, really, ever.
And I like every record they've put out. But Second Stage, Turbine Blade's probably my number 2 favorite. I like Keeping Secrets the most. I miss this era of the band, though. The emo era of the band. Because they're just a prog rock band now. And have been since the third record. But I guess I had a lot more lead time on this year because I listened to a couple other things. I listened to One Beat by Slater Kenny. Good record. It's not as strong as some of the earlier stuff, but it's still really, really, really good record.
Yeah, I didn't hit too many records from this year for revisiting or listening to even for the first time. I'm trying to think of... I kind of threw the general year into my rotation, so it really only came up occasionally. I did partially revisit Norma Jean's first record, Bless the Martyr and Kiss the Child. The evangelicalism of this record and a lot of Christian hardcore and metalcore from this time period, which I will maybe musically stand by, has not aged well. It's a little off-putting to me now.
It's primarily Josh, right?
It's Josh. It's
because he carried that into the Chariot too, and that is kind of like the weird thing about the Chariot that is always there. Like even like towards the end with like Wars and Rumors of Wars and those records. I think he even has a little bit of that in the '68, but like I don't know that he views the '68 as a mission like they viewed Norma Jean originally. Yeah.
This record is like good. It's really good, and like it, even despite the ways in which I now know it's pretty derivative, I think it's still a really good record that holds its value. I think that this was really the one time where Josh's whole "we record everything live," like single takes, really actually works. I mean, I guess the Chariot probably did that. I think a lot of their basic tracks were recorded live on their later records, but definitely added some overdubs. But this record, from what I understand, was recorded totally live. It was just better produced than the first Chariot record.
Yeah.
And it's the right choice. Like, it really, really works here. Because it's not pristine production. Like, it's not super clean. They definitely don't sound like they're like perfectly isolated, but it's really impressive. Like, they had to have been a really good band to see live at this point.
Yeah.
Is the impression that I get from this record. Like, really tight. Like, even though this record isn't like really tight, like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like the right kind of off kilter. Anyway, going really long on this record that I only listened to like half of it. I don't know why. I had a lot of thoughts on it.
Continuing my like check out every Bad Religion record as you come across it. I checked out The Process of the Belief. This is one of those ones that I like seriously was considering buying in Walmart when I was a teenager. It's good. I think it's probably better than people remember. Out of all the albums I've listened to post 2000 from them, I think I've heard New Maps of Hell and Age of Unreason, and I like this one the best. I still need to get a couple more in there. There's a few in that time period I've not hit. I like this one. It's got Sorrow, like that's kind of like the big song, but also Supersonics on there. There's just a bunch of other really good songs. Strong record. Maybe one of the strongest in their later career, but yeah, I gave that one a healthy listen. I also revisited Suicide Envoys by Hot Snakes. So, like, we talked a little bit about Rocket from the Crypt, about how, like, why didn't they make it? Or why doesn't Rocket get, like, kind of, like, the same respect, I guess? listening to Hot Snakes, I was like, oh, right. This was the critical acclaim band. Like this, they got a lot of attention with Hot Snakes. They got the music journalist, takes with Hot Snakes. They got Record Store Guy on Hot Snakes. So I guess whenever you're doing so much at one time, there's only so much is going to get attention. And Hot Snakes was like the hot new thing. So
yeah, this is their second record. I think it's their best record. Yeah, when you look at 2002, like Rocket from the Crypt and Hot Snakes both put out records, and you look at what those records are, and it's like Live from Camp X-Ray, which is like probably like the third or fourth Rocket record that I reach for, and you compare it to Suicide Invoice, which I think might be the best thing that either of them ever did in their entire discography. Yeah.
I also gave Tragedy's Vengeance a listen. I apparently had a lot of free time to listen to records from 2002 this year. Tragedy are good, and I don't know why I've not spent... There's a lot of these like icons of crust that like for some reason I've not really dug into too deep, but I've definitely listened to Tragedy, and I'm like, this band is good. They are so good and fast, and they have this style of guitar playing that's like melodic. It's for like an unmelodic band. There's a lot of melody of those riffs, so... Fun record. And the last thing I have on page 2 that like I actually got to and listened to, I think you and our younger brother were roasting me for, is Finch's What Is to Burn. What It Is to Burn. So this was inspired by a TikTok. There's some new TikTok guy who like he basically is like doing a podcast or a YouTube video on TikTok. And like he did one on Sugar Cult. I'm talking about whatever happened to Sugar Cult, and then like he like, interviewed the band in it, and then then he did this kind of one on Finch where he's like, whatever, what was the deal with Finch? And it's like they put out one record, and then their second record everybody hated, and then on and on and on. So I was like, what's the deal with the first record? So I listened to it. It's way too long. It's an hour long, an hour and 1 minute. There's a bonus track there, but that's only like a 4-minute bonus track. The last track's like 13 minutes long. There's a weird like dance remix in the middle of the record. I'd say it's half of a good album. I get it. It's the type of bullshit I probably would have loved at the time.
You didn't want to talk about more poorly aged evangelical Christian metalcore? The first Demon Hunter record.
Is that on there?
Page 3.
Oh, I haven't got to page 3 yet.
Oh.
Did you listen to
We
that?
don't have to talk about. No, we don't have to talk about that.
I did listen to Caution by Hot Water Music.
Yeah, I did want to talk about that.
So that's a record that we've always kind of, our group of friends specifically, has always been like, yeah, I like everything up until Caution. And so I was like, I gotta reevaluate and see if that's true. If Caution is as bad as my brain tells me it is. And it's not. But it's also not much. I'd say it's better than the one before. Was that Flight in a Crash?
I don't know if I would say it's better than A Flight in a Crash. But I would say that A Flight in a Crash gets too much of a pass, while Caution gets kind of excessively roasted.
Yeah.
In the Hot Water Music, like, Caution being the dividing line doesn't really make sense when, a flight in a Crash is like right there. I think that the new What Next is a more accurate dividing line.
Yeah,
because I could go all the way up through Caution. Like it's not bad, but it's not great. And I think the new What Next is like mostly bad.
Caution. I was like, hey, Remedy and Trusty Chords, the first 2 tracks, they're the best 2 tracks. The rest of the record just sounds kind of samey. Yeah, we had that little bit of discussion on Twitter with about like pre-Epitaph, post-Epitaph, and we're definitely pre-Epitaph boys. But looking forward to the new one though. The first 2 singles actually really good. So as long as it's not another Light It Up.
Light it up, up, light it up, up.
But yeah, I feel like, unless there's anything on page 3 you want to talk about.
No, not really. That's probably a good point to move on and talk about our album.
Yep. The record Dave has selected for us to talk about today is the Roustabouts, The Only One. So, this may be the most obscure band we've ever talked about on we've ever talked about on the show. So, the stats on this record are very difficult to find. So, the Roustabouts were from Oklahoma City. This album was released on Haunted Town Records. This is their first album. Didn't know anything about Haunted Town. I looked up some stuff that they put out, and they released albums by the Staggers and Brass Knuckle Boys. But their most well-known thing they have in their discography is a reissue of the entire Naked Raygun vinyl catalog in the late 2000s. So it's a weird label to be doing those reissues, but I'm assuming they're a Chicago record label. They just knew some of the guys in the band, and maybe they just worked out a deal. So that's cool for them. So this is their only official release, though there is an unofficial release, if you could call it that. The band put it up themselves, so whatever. It's called 3017. It was recorded in 2004. So I think it's basically an album they were going to put out and then didn't, and then they released it on Bandcamp in 2018, I think. So you can hear that. That's also on Spotify as well. So the personnel on this record, I had to ask Dave because there's no listings on Discogs besides one member of the band, and that lists Daniel Felton on guitar and vocals. Thankfully, Dave's source over on Oklahoma Lefty is chock full of information. So the other two people on this record are Nick Wagoner on guitar and vocals and Jesse Smith on drums. Not that Jesse Smith.
That's really funny.
And the record was engineered by Wes Sharon, who also engineered one of Farr's albums and produced an American Aquarium record in 2018. Those are kind of the most well-known things Wes has been involved with. The band was only a three-piece at this point. I don't know who recorded the bass on the record. Dave didn't give me that information, but they did wind up recruiting a bass player later, Nick Massey, after the record came out. So 3 people on the record, 4 people in the band. So here's the part where I usually ask, what was your opinions on the band before you listened to the record for this show?
Yeah, absolutely zero opinions. No idea. Never heard of them. I'm only just now finding out what a roustabout actually is. But that's an oil worker, right?
Oh, I don't know.
I think that's what I'm coming up with. It's oil field roustabout is a position that's showing up on ZipRecruiter. So ZipRecruiter. This episode brought to you by ZipRecruiter. If you want to go be a roustabout on an oil field in New Mexico.
I thought roustabout was a ruffian, that kind of. It's just a word for tough and tumble.
Well, I mean that's how Elvis would use it. I don't know if that's just because most oil workers are rough people. No, yeah, I mean it's unskilled or casual laborer. Yeah, so that's what it means. Dock laborer, deckhand, oil rig, circus laborer.
Ooh,
okay.
I want to be a circus roustabout.
Yeah, sounds like a terrible job.
Yeah, I had no real knowledge about this band before Dave selected it for the show, so I didn't know. I I may have never even heard the name. If I had heard the name, it was just in passing, maybe through Oklahoma Lefty. Good.
No, yeah, I was just thinking. It just sounds like a band name. I think that's what it. I don't think I've ever heard of this particular band before.
There are other bands with this name too.
Yeah,
lots of them actually. I found another one from Oklahoma City too. I was like, "What? How is this different?" It was like associated with a college like performance thing. So I was like, "Okay, this is not the same thing." Y'all really need to Google. Though I guess an inactive band from the early 2000s isn't really necessarily going to go out of their way to be like, "Hey, you used our name." But there's like a German folk band too now.
Yeah, I think there's like a string band.
Yeah,
like a Washington DC string band.
Yeah. So, thankfully, at this point, I'm going to let Dave speak for himself. This is usually where I ask what made you choose this album for us to talk about. So, take it away, Dave.
What's up, posers? This is Dave Brown, jumping in here to give my 2 cents on the album I picked for my Patreon selection here on the Punk Lotto podcast, and it is from the year 2002. It's the band the Roustabouts, who most of you have probably never heard of unless you are from Oklahoma, and it's their one proper full-length album, the only one. It's freaking brilliant. I love it. But before I talk a little more about that, I should probably mention a couple other things that came out in 2002 that I was really digging. So my other favorite records from this year include the GC5's Never Bet the Devil Your Head. Hot Water Music's Caution.
It's a gamble, double down or don't. Step out if you want to, stay in if you're bold, and roll. Could be a suicide, just as well I'm bold. Guessing's never easy, and wishes never sold. Let go.
And of course, One Man Army's final full-length album, Rumors and Headlines.
S.O.S. in a state of emergency. The situation and the prying eyes looking at me. Is there nowhere I could go? Somewhere you couldn't see. S.O.S. in a state of emergency.
Just with those records alone, it's a pretty killer year. So the Roustabouts are a band that I have known for 20 plus years. They are from Oklahoma, which is where I am from mostly. They started in the late 90s, originally friends from high school, met in Hera, Oklahoma, if my memory serves correctly. They first started playing under the name the Bomars. I don't think they ever released anything. But then I first saw them open up for the Hudson Falcons in probably 1999, maybe it was 2000. The Falcons were touring for their debut album, Desperation Revolution, which is a tremendous album. The GC5 were opening up. They were touring for, I'm blanking, the name of their first album, Kisses from Hanoi. Wow, blanked on that one. If side note, real quick, if you've never listened to either the Hudson Falcons or the GC5, I highly, highly recommend them. They are superb bands and even better people. And I think at that show, the Roustabouts played a cover of Sham 69's The Kids Are United. And if memory serves, the GC5 did a cover of Coxbar's Where Are They Now? Wow, I am having nothing but brain farts this morning. So yeah, GC5 did Where Are They Now? And then the Hudson Falcons did Stiff Little Fingers Alternative Ulster. It was a fun night. It was a really, really good show. I befriended the guys at that point and have just known them since. They did eventually record The Only One after they had recorded another record that never saw the light of day, really. It was on an upstart label that shut down pretty much after they recorded the record. Apparently it sounded really bad. At the time, I really wanted to get my hands on it, and actually, if I could get my hands on it now, I would, but it is probably in a dumpster somewhere or in a landfill, because it boiled down to the record label went under. They reached out to the band. They were like, hey, we've got all these CDs. We're not doing business. Do you just want them for like $1 each? And it was like 1,500 CDs, and the Roustabouts said, no, we don't. They ended up going back to the studio and produced The Only One, which came out on Haunted Town Records, which is an interesting record label. I think originally started in Chicago. It's also had releases from the Staggers, another band that I love, that band from Dallas. They released some records by the Brass Knuckle Boys. They did a bunch of Naked Raygun reissues and a few other things here and there. All of this was part of that late 90s kind of street punk scene, the whole bunch of bands who had found the Swingin' Utters first album. I should not be recording audio today because I am just screwing this up left and right. Streets of San Francisco. So yes, Streets of San Francisco and Those Unknowns self-titled debut, which both came out, I think, 94, 95-ish, and just started a whole slew of bands. Roustabouts were kind of part of that, even though you can tell pretty quickly that they definitely diverged from that, and those seeds were even planted in this album, as one of their later big influences is Hot Water Music, which is something that definitely comes up more in a collection that was released in 2018. By the way, cheap plug for my own nonsense that I do. I do a podcast called One Band, 5 Songs, which you can find exclusively on Spotify because reasons. Anyway, one of my most recent episodes, the 20th episode, in fact, was on the Roustabouts, on this band. And if you would be so kind to check that out, I would greatly appreciate it. So I'm not going to really dig too much more into the record or the band other than to say they're super nice guys. The drummer, Jesse Smith, is one of the best drummers I have ever seen live. He is phenomenal. So much to the point, I saw this band, Euclid Crash. They were opening for, was that the Stephen Edgerton? I think it was a Stephen Edgerton CD release show in 2010. Euclid Crash was opening. Yes, in fact, it was that show. And I hadn't seen Jesse in a number of years because the Roustabouts called it a day in the early to mid-aughts. So it's probably been 5 years since I'd seen him. And I'm watching Euclid Crash play, and I'm like, oh my God, this drummer is incredible. And after the show, I end up talking to some members of the band, and they're like, that's Jesse from the Roustabouts, right? I was like, what? So I had to go say hi. We reconnected. It was great. So Jesse and the guitar player and / singer Nick are in a band, Don't Make Ghosts, from Oklahoma, obviously, duh. And also has Dirk from Blacklist Royals on bass guitar, and a guy named Jared from Oklahoma. I can't remember what bands he used to play in, but they are effing phenomenal. I cannot suggest that band enough. They have 2 EPs out that are just flipping brilliant. And really, it's kind of what Roustabouts did. It's that natural progression. You can see where their music was going and whatnot. So I think I have ranted on long enough. Sorry for taking up 10 minutes of your show. Gentlemen, it is always a pleasure to talk to y'all. I'm really hoping that this record is 3 for 3. As of right now, I am 2 for 2 in my recommendations to Punk Lotto Pod. You guys have both enjoyed All's Breaking Things and John Moreland and the Dust Bowl Souls, Everything the Hard Way. I'm really hoping this is 3 for 3. Come on. And Dylan, I know you're going to be the holdout, so gentlemen, do me a solid. Okay, guys? Thanks a lot. Be safe out there. Take care.
Thanks, Dave, for spelling it all out for us. Like you said there is an episode of One Band 5 Songs on the Roustabouts, so check that out over on Spotify. So, what do they sound like? I was having a hard time. We actually talked about this a little bit on the Patreon episode as well. So they get kind of tagged as a street punk and like an oi band, and I don't think that's accurate.
Yeah, I mean, so we kind of talked about this, but I guess I feel like oi is such a like UK punk thing, which I think it gets used. I guess it gets used in the US a little bit differently to just generally refer to just any kind of like working class punk band. So any kind of punk band with like a working class aesthetic. So I think by extension, you could even say like Naked Raygun are an oi band. And I mean, if you're including Naked Raygun, then like, okay, I can see how that's where the Roustabouts might fall into that category. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just generally, it's a blue collar kind of iteration of punk rock, which the Roustabouts definitely seem to have, like, you know, in their name and in their aesthetic and kind of, you know, what I could gather of their lyrics. Like, it's definitely the vibe.
Yeah, and I think Haunted Town has some like oi bands and some street punk bands. Like Brass Knuckle Boys, I think, are straight up like an oi street punk band. I was reading an interview that Dave did with one of the members of the band on Oklahoma Lefty, and in it, the band member, I don't remember which one it was, said that they didn't really understand or they didn't really think of themselves as a street punk band, but they just assumed because of the association that with those other bands is why they got it. And he said that they kind of used it to their advantage, being, you know, like getting in places where they maybe wouldn't have got before. They definitely were like, fine, if you want to call us a street punk band, cool. If that means we get to play some shows, you know, whatever. When I listen to it, I get a lot of different things. So it reminds me, the two biggest things that it reminds me of are Bouncing Souls and A Veil. I feel like it's like a mixture of those two sounds.
Yeah, those are definitely the big ones I got. Like the first putting the record on, I was like, whoa, big Bouncing Souls feeling here. I mean, not like, it's not exactly like Bouncing Souls, but I think it comes across maybe in the vocals, and especially in the way that the vocals are mixed. Mm-hmm. That gives me that very like big anthemic Bouncing Souls kind of feeling. So yeah, musically though, I would say it's more like A Veil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's punk rock. It's fast-paced. There's some, like, skate punk elements to it. I guess in the way that A Veil uses it, and less in a Bad Religion way. I guess that's technically melodic hardcore, whatever you want to call it. But then there's like other things in there too. Like I had hints of like Rancid. At one point I had a little Dillinger 4, some Stiff Little Fingers.
Yeah, I mean, you could take it back to like New York Dolls even. Like I feel like it's just generally kind of raspy punk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were influenced by Hot Water Music, but I don't think those influences showed through quite as much on this record. I think it's the next one they were going to release that's where they showed that side a little more. I think they were definitely listening to Hot Water Music at the time, which, I think everyone was in 2002. It's the year of caution, after all. Yeah, little face-to-face, little early Swingin' Utters-esque vocals. Like, it's just a lot of different things, but not, like, a specific sound either, which is unique.
Which I think is their biggest advantage. One of the things that I enjoyed the most about listening to it is that I could make all of those connections without it being like, this is a band that's directly imitating one of those bands. Like there's a lot here that I can enjoy and appreciate. I think that like I'm said my first big impression was Bouncing Souls, but like I feel like, and we've talked about the Bouncing Souls a few times lately, like what they do that reminds me of the Bouncing Souls is kind of what I like about the Bouncing Souls, who I don't really like. So it's nice to kind of have this band that takes those things that I like and kind of puts them with some other things that I like from other bands that I'm not super into Avail either.
Really?
I mean, I just don't think I've spent much time with them, but every time I've listened to them, it's kind of like, yeah, that's fine. That's pretty good. They're an important band, and I recognize that. And I recognize the way that they're influential, but on bands that I like a lot. So, yeah, I don't know. But, yeah, I guess tipping my hand, showing my hand here. Yeah, Dave had his speculation that I might be the holdout. I liked it. I enjoyed listening to this. Like, there was never any moment where I was like, I don't like that. Or there were no songs that was like, I dislike this song. There weren't any parts of songs that I was like, I dislike this idea. Mm-hmm. My only real criticism is that it just really runs together. And a lot of the songs they don't really distinguish themselves. They didn't upon listening to it. But I also feel like this is the kind of record that if you enjoy listening to it the first time you hear it, and then you come around to it again, like and listen to it again, things are gonna pop out, and the individual songs will start to stand out. So it's definitely a record I could spend more time with and find myself like really, really enjoying it. So
yeah, that's one of the interesting things about doing these Patreon sponsored episodes, is because for the most part, people are going to choose albums that are like probably up there as far as their like personal favorites. Like Dave considers Roustabouts one of his favorite bands ever. And so he's also, this record came out in 2002. So he's had almost 20 years to like really enjoy it. I mean, I don't know if he got it in 2002, but he's had at least 15 years of like listening to this record and like enjoying it, getting, used to everything. And so whenever we do it, we're given like a week or two to really like kind of dive into the album. So it's it's a fine line we have to kind of balance between being like, well, I didn't spend enough time with it, like you can't do that. But I echo those sentiments. I say overall, I enjoy the record. I think it's a fun, fast-paced punk rock record. There's a lot of it's high energy. It's driving pretty much the whole time. Like it's one of those records. I was really impressed at how like hard and fast they go through the whole record. Like there are no slow moments. Usually an album like this though has like a ballad or a slow song that like kind of like breaks up the album. But then a lot of times when those songs are on those records, you're like, oh, that's Willie's favorite song. And you wind up skipping it, or, it's not one you think of as like your favorite.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it needed a tiny bit more variety. Or I think it needed to just be a little bit shorter. Because I feel like that kind of like all out, hard and fast, those records need to be like a real tight 25 minutes, 20 minutes even, to really, really have that impact for me. I think one or two more mid-paced songs could have balanced it out and made, at least I think those songs would have stood out to me.
Yeah.
On the first pass. So, but yeah, I mean, you write the songs that you have and you put them on the record, you know. I don't know.
And like we said, there were really only 3 of them working on this record. So,
yeah.
You know, they didn't have a bass player in there, like a specific bass player in the band at this point. So, I guess that could be part of it. You're just like, we have all these songs, let's record them. That may be what it was. They just had all these songs, they recorded them. And maybe it wasn't so much that they were like, let's construct an album, you know. So, because they did some touring, but they were primarily known as just being in the area. They're like a regional band for the most part. So they need stuff to sell at shows. So you need a record. So you might as well go in there and record something. So you have it. I also got the impression that they're really just a group of friends who just like making music together, because Jesse and Nick are both in a band together now. So clearly they like each other and they're like just hanging out and playing together. So I think
I don't get the impression that they were like a career band, that they had any like, you know, going for it mentality. They probably didn't have the expectation of ever being, you know, a actively touring band, which I think is like, you know, I think that's a respectable lane for a punk band.
Get tired of living in a dead end town. Get tired of running, get it beaten down. That's when you find your own way to live. Put your own values in your own ideas and make it your own. You understand that you don't fit in. You come and tell them that you're friends. That's how you find your own way to live. On the outside looking in, you're on your own and you don't need that. The way you feel about the world outside, they wouldn't understand it if they tried, and they never will. You understand that you don't fit in. You come and talk with the back of friends. That's how you find your own way to live.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being like, I just want to be a weekend band, or I want to be, you know, I don't see this being my full-time job, but I still want to do this. So, you know, how do you make that work? If you turn it into just like a couple, you know, stints, or, you know, you turn it into just like, well, we hang out and we play, you know, that's fun too. I mean, that's the whole point of being a band, is to have fun. So I think that should be the number one goal.
I think that should be, I think not enough bands have that mentality.
Yeah.
There's definitely like if you're not having fun doing this, you really don't need to be doing it, because it's not making you any money.
Yeah.
Like it's not actually your job. It's
yeah. When it becomes your job, like you can make a living off of it, I think that's when you're allowed to then be like, ooh, this is hard. You know, like, you know.
Yeah. Then you get to be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna suck it in, and I'm gonna grit my teeth, and gonna put out the work and do the tours.
Yeah.
But yeah, you gotta earn that.
Right. Yeah, you're right. There aren't a lot of bands there's too many bands that are just like, how do we make it as their main goal, versus like, how do we have fun? How do we write good songs?
Yeah.
And when I listen to this record, I hear a band that's having fun. Like, this is just people having fun. Like, there's not a down moment on the record, as far as like, there's not like you were saying earlier, there's no bad songs on the album. There's no points on the record where I'm like, I don't like this song. Like, I like them all roughly the same, as far as in the same range of like enjoyment. There's no single track where I'm like, ugh, what is this? You know, at all. And even like the highest tracks, I'm not like, oh my God, this is so much better than these other tracks, you know? I do think
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think if I could pick, I think the things that would maybe distinguish the songs the most to me would be like, ooh, I really like the guitar solo in this song. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, because the guitar playing is really good.
Yeah.
It's not like super shreddy or technical, but it's good. There are solos. There are lead parts. Like it's...
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of solos on this record. Like, I'd say a majority of the tracks have a solo or like an extended like lead section. There's like some fun Chuck Berry sort of solos, and then like there's occasional like twangy kind of like country inspired, you know, solos. So like there's a lot of excellent guitar playing on this album. I'd say one of the things about the record that I really, really liked is the drumming too. So like, especially on the back half of the album, where like I've kind of seen the tricks that the guitar players are doing at this stage, you know, up to that point, and my attention listening to it kind of shifted to what the drummer was doing. And there were a lot of parts where it was like, he has lots of really fun like fills and like these spots where it's just, he's doing like that. He's trying to like line up like the drum hit with like the, like a chunky like guitar riff and like a strum. So like at the exact point, you know, trying to nail the hit, the strike at the exact moment the strum starts, gives you that punchy. I don't know music well enough. Like I don't know musical terms to know what you call when you're trying to line up the drum with the guitar strum. Syncopation?
No, that's not syncopation.
Yeah. See,
syncopation would be the opposite.
Yeah, right. So you're trying to between them.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like they're just really locked in. Like the drumming is fast.
Yeah.
Really fast. Yeah. I did kind of the same thing. Like the back half of the record, I'm like, huh, he's really going on the drums.
Because he would throw in these like kind of like random like strikes and like hits and just like, or like a fill in a spot where you're just like, oh, that's different. You know, like I'd say the drumming's probably my favorite aspect of the album.
That's where I think I get some of the Hot Water music.
Oh yeah. I could see that.
They have that kind of rhythmic sense.
Yeah. Seeing as there's no like real bass player in the band at this point, the bass is kind of like lost on the album. There's some spots where it kind of sticks out. Maybe on some like intro sort of moments where it's like drum and bass only, or like the guitar is like in like one of those like left channel or right channel only moments, which makes sense. If there's not like a dedicated bass player in the band, then, you know, it's not necessarily going to be like, we're not getting, you know, Fugazi bass lines, you know. We're not even getting Hot Water Music's bass work at this point. Yeah, vocally, he's got this kind of like gruff, fast delivery, and there's like, it's really shouted. They do a good job they put a lot of gang vocals on a lot of these tracks. I guess that's where Oi kind of, you know, goes in again. Like there's a lot of, you know, gang vocals in Oi, chanting, you know, backing vocals. So they do a really good job of throwing in the gang vocals for the key, you know, for the choruses to really make them like hit and strike, you know, stand out the most. They're maximizing like kind of like, I feel like they perfectly maximize like every aspect of what they're capable of in almost every song.
Yeah. It's all in.
Yeah.
On everything.
Yeah.
Every song.
I do think that maybe what makes it kind of suffer ultimately. So I'd say at the midway point, the album starts to kind of lose momentum to me. So it's or not momentum, but rather like, yeah, some of the tracks kind of blend together. So I'd say up to like Privileged Few, I was like really digging it. You know, I was like, this is a really good record. And I think the nonstop nature of the record is kind of the part where I was just like, okay. It's just kind of like starting to fade. Like my brain is starting to drift a little bit, or like I'm not quite like as engaged with it as I want it to be. But then, you know, they kind of win me back with the last two tracks. Let's see, that would be Fall Into Line and Center of the City. Those are kind of, I think listening to Center of the City is the longest track on the album, and it feels the most, it feels like an ender. Like I bet they ended a lot of shows with this song. because it kind of had the most like moving parts to it, like the most variety of different sounds on any song on the album. But I think the first 4 tracks are probably the best tracks on here. I think Find Your Own Way is probably my favorite out of everything on the album. That's track 3. And then We Believe has a cool kind of like double whiskey, Coke, no ice, palm muted thing going on there too. Yeah. So its biggest weakness is there's some sameness to it, but
which is really not a big
right
criticism. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I listen to a lot of records that are very samey, and I love them. So it's one of those cheats for music criticism to say like, I don't really have anything particularly negative to say about this record, but I didn't really love it either. It's kind of samey.
Yeah,
it's like that's not really the problem. The problem is I just either need to spend more time with it, or it's just not for me. I don't know.
Yeah. I do think they could have thrown in some stuff that maybe was just like maybe an acoustic sort of interlude, or like a between track sort of buffer, or maybe a song with like a unique kind of like intro or lead in, because really everything just kind of like kicks off right away on just about every track. So it's really nitpicking, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, from like a production standpoint, like that's maybe where I would want some variety and like tempo. And then like, and I think ultimately there are probably just enough songs on the record that don't have their thing. Mm-hmm. Like they don't have that hook or like unique part to make it stand out. But I don't know. I get it. I get why this is Dave's pick. Mm-hmm. I get that this is a record that you can get really into, and continually enjoy. I don't see why. You wouldn't get tired of it.
Yeah,
it's always gonna sound the same.
Yeah, I tried to find lyrics online. I couldn't really find anything. So I brought this up on Twitter, and so like doing research on this record, it was like, man, I bet there were a lot of blogs and WordPresses that probably mentioned them during this time period. Like, and then it just brought to mind that era of like, oh yeah, you used to have like all your blogs bookmarked, and you would check them once a week, sometimes daily if they were a really active blog. And it was this like, the good ones were this like very curated. It was basically like you take this person, it's like, this is my favorite, these are my favorite bands, this is my taste in music, and every day or every other day, here's another record that I love, and I'm going to tell you why I love it and what I know about them. And it was this very much like kind of like word of mouth way of kind of like sharing bands that you liked. And that's a lot of those blogspots and WordPresses, they're just gone now. Like they kind of became abandoned by the writers. They just stopped using them. And then that kind of like left room for like the accounts to get hacked. And so then these old blogs that you would go check out, and then you go back and look, and it's nothing but like just a wall of like, looks like code basically. And it's like, well, I guess that person's years of writing is just gone.
Yeah. I would say 2002 is probably early blog spots.
Yeah, real early. Like that would have been
really early.
But also this is the kind of band that I see like somebody in 2007 would have been going through their CD collection and being like, oh, I want to write about this band. You know, I had those blogs that I followed.
People did that. People were just like, I have this CD and I saw this band live, like, and I know something about them. I can write about them. And you would like rip it and you would put it on Rapid Share.
Yeah.
And then you go write a blog post about it. Be like, here's this record by this band that's broken up. Check it out. It's good. And people would read it and be like, that sounds interesting. And you download it and you listen to it.
Towards the end, it got lazy. Yeah, there were some.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole, like, just like, how many different ways can you say this brutal and crushing bands sound like Converge or Cursed? Or
at least that was the corner we were looking at. And then there were like just like the leaks pay accounts where it was just like just posting leaks. And yeah, it got a little less fun. I think Bandcamp was taking over at that point, and that's why you started to see it, like the writing about stuff kind of fade away. But then, like, I do remember there were some later ones, like Sophie's Floorboard was like one of the big ones that ran for a long time after everyone else was done with blogs. And the Tumblr, I guess, took some of that too. And then Tumblr died.
I've seen people talking about Tumblr again.
Yeah, I saw someone saying like, "Wait, are bands using Tumblr again?" Because apparently bands are using Tumblr again.
I mean,
okay,
sure,
yeah.
Do it.
It's better than Twitter and Instagram.
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. Twitter's fun for like interactions, but it's not like the best for, longer stuff, Yeah, I'd welcome the return of Tumblr. They got to fix that interface. It's not fun to look at all. But I guess too, those blogs, they have this kind of like ephemeral, just kind of like they're lost to the sands of time quality to them, which then it made me think, I was like, well, zines are kind of like that too. Like zines were just like photocopied, stapled together things. And so like, unless someone was like very closely curating like a zine collection or like a database later, those zines are gone too. So it fits with punk rock. Like it's definitely one of the elements to it. And I guess Bandcamp can work that way, if a band decides to delete all their stuff one day and that's it, and they're the main source of their stuff, then, who's going to get it again,
Yeah, I mean, like, things are archived. There are some things that are archived. You can go Wayback Machine and find, but I haven't tried to do much of that kind of digging on blog spots. I'd be curious to see how much of that you can find.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really dug too deep into Wayback Machine, but I also can't remember any of the names of any of them.
Yeah,
that's part of the problem.
You got to find the ones that are still active that had the links on the sidebar.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and like the only other thing I really have is like I looked at the album art. I like to look at what the cover looked like, and it's a very 2002 album cover of not a lot of money into it. It's just like a photo. It's like a black and white photo, but they put kind of like a color filter on it. It's got a little bluish to it. It's of a guy like manning a machine gun. Looks like in a helicopter maybe. And then like the band's name is in like that red label maker kind of like font. I don't know what you call. I guess label maker really is the only thing you would call that. And then the title of the record's in like cursive font, like kind of at the very bottom right corner of the cover. It's like, yeah, that's a 2002 album cover. You got your mix of scripts and kind of like probably just a generic cover that you Googled, whatever you did. You Alta Vista'd. You Yahoo searched Army Man. But yeah. So yeah, I think that's a good point as any to wrap up. Enjoyable record. Fun. I get a lot of what Dave gets out of this record. So yeah, I like it. It's a good one. I'd say you got 3 out of 3 so far. You're batting whatever baseball stats. That's supposed to be 300? I don't know. 1,000? I'm floundering in baseball stats. What
Don't ask me.
But I think that
you did good, Dave.
Yeah. Good pick, Dave. So we'll probably hear from you again at the end of the year with our best of stuff. So everyone else stay tuned for that stuff, and thank you so much. We did all the plugs up top, but this was good. Thank you.